What really happened between those two wooden stakes and the empty tomb? For hundreds of years, the gospel narratives have told us that Christ perished on a Friday and rose again on Sunday. But what about Saturday? That day full of enigmas, that unsettling stillness that lies between death and life again. Most of us neglect this question, but not Mel Gibson. When asked about the possibility of a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson answered precisely, "The resurrection is not merely an event, it's an immense cosmic tremor." He doesn't just focus on showing Christ leaving a tomb. His intention is to investigate the immaterial dimensions, the clash between dark and light forces, and what the consequence of this is for paradise, damnation, and all of humankind. To achieve this, Gibson drew not only on canonical texts, but also on the visionary experiences of St. Catherine Emmerich, a 19th century German nun whose impressive revelations moved theological thinkers and film experts. In this audiovisual presentation, we delve into the hidden narrative underlying those three crucial periods. We will journey alongside the women who carried out Jesus' burial. We will descend with Christ to the deepest layers of Sheol. We will witness the trembling of the watchman, the rest of the celestial beings, and that precise moment when chronology split into two segments. If you thought you understood the Christmas narrative, rethink your assumptions. Here is the ascension from a new perspective. Stay with us on this journey. It was a Friday around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The celestial vault was clear, yet the atmosphere was heavy, unusually heavy, as if absolutely everything in the order of creation was interrupting its desire to breathe. On the slopes of Golgotha, Jesus, coming from the town of Nazareth, he who restored the sick, awakened the lifeless, and forgiven their sins, was about to experience his end. His physical body hung inert on the wooden cross, lacerated, filled with crimson liquid, and breathing with significant difficulty. And in that final second, he raised his eyes towards the heavens and uttered a last cry. "Supreme Creator, I place my being in your hands." These expressions, documented in Luke's narrative, were not merely the last cry of a mortal. They represented an indication from the invisible realm, a second so profoundly sacred that, as narrated, even the earthly ground manifested itself in response. The surface shifted violently, the limestone formations shattered, and the sanctuary's fabric, a cloth that served as a partition between the sacred space and the crowd, was torn from top to bottom. St. Catherine Emmerich, the mystic whose insights inspired Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, and more recently The Resurrection, documents this moment with astonishing detail. According to her account, the tremor transcended the merely physical. It was religious in nature. The religious leaders succumbed, stunned by the absolute stillness. The heavens, despite their brightness, echoed distant thunder. Even Pontius Pilate, located in his government palace, identified an inexplicable transformation. He dispatched emissaries, uncertain whether a popular rebellion had begun or something far more significant. Beside the base of the wooden crucifix, a Roman warrior identified as Longinus was fulfilling his duty of vigilance. He was the one who had pierced Jesus' body with a pointed armor, fulfilling an ancient prophecy. And the moment the reddish fluid and water touched his arm, something fragmented within him. He was not a prophet. He wasn't even a follower. However, at that moment, he glimpsed beyond death. He glimpsed absolute truth, and he uttered words that continue to resonate to this day. Undoubtedly, this was divinity in human form. As evening approached, two unlikely figures stepped forward, Joseph from Arimathea and Nicodemus. Both were prominent figures in the Israelite community, yet privately they had embraced the faith in Jesus. And at that moment, they performed a courageous act. They requested permission from the Roman magistrate to proceed with the burial. Having obtained consent, they went to the crossbeam, escorted by John, the highly esteemed disciple, and an Ethiopian assistant whom Emmerich vividly described in his mystical experiences. Together they removed the spikes from Christ's extremities, each producing a resonance in the void, like a sonic rhythm of sorrow. And there, near them, was Mary. Without uttering a cry, without losing her senses, she remained in profound stillness, yet remarkably unwavering. St. Catherine describes her not so broken, but as resilient as a monument amidst a storm. They then washed Jesus' body with water. They removed the hardened reddish material from his wounds. They used aromatic oils, myrrh, spikenard, and additional aromatic essences that filled the air with a transcendental scent. This was not merely a burial procedure, it was a final act of veneration. They carefully covered his remains with white cloths, with tenderness, not as one prepares any ordinary corpse, but with the same care as one bids farewell to a sovereign. Then they placed him in a recently carved tomb in limestone near an ancient olive tree, a peaceful space, a place far from reach, and they sealed it with a colossal rock so voluminous that it would require countless combatants to move it. However, this did not satisfy the empire. The magistrate, beset by paranoia and political pressure, placed 16 warriors in position for continuous surveillance. They lit lamps on both sides of the tomb and took turns during the period of darkness. Among them was a warrior named Abinadar, a character ignored by the sacred texts, but revealed through Catherine's perceptions as a commander experiencing an uncomfortable sensation he could not understand. And yet, even with every precaution taken, even with the empire's military supremacy, something had already secretly begun. Something immaterial, something of divine order. St. Catherine recounts that a soft fragrance floated in the air above the tomb, a sweetness so delicate and so venerable that only those of genuine consciousness could identify it. Mary experienced it. John felt it. The warriors did not. For this was not directed to the organs of the earth. It was a whispered transmission, not out of bravery but in calm. The narrative had not expired. On the visible surface, everything remained at rest. But beneath the outer layer, beyond the reach of imperial weapons and human intelligence, Christ was already in motion, not physically but spiritually, and he was moving toward a space from which no mortal has ever returned. While his physical form lay cold, covered in stillness and fabric, the immaterial aspect of Christ did not remain numb, anything but still, according to the spiritual experiences of St. Catherine Emmerich, and as recounted in the early apostolic transmission, Jesus penetrated the depths of existence, the space of souls, not as an illusion, but as a sovereign monarch. In the medieval Jewish perspective, there existed an enigmatic place called Sheol, the realm of disembodied souls. It did not represent perdition as we understand it today. It was a space of permanence, a kind of hall where the virtuous and the wicked awaited their destiny. Even the virtuous of bygone times, Adam, Eve, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, remained there, yearning for a hope they cultivated. And then everything underwent transformation. In that space, filled with darkness, a light radiated. St. Catherine narrates Jesus descending like lightning, radiant, imperial, unassailable. He did not plead. He did not request authorization. He came fully authorized. The fullness of the one who controls the flames of life and death. Within that space, the virtuous stirred. Adam and Eve perceived a change in temperature. Hundreds of periods of shame were instantly warmed. Noah, who waited searching for clues to a reconstituted planet, felt as if the ark had finally reached the shore. Abraham's credit was realized. Moses never again required pills because the instruction was alive and present there. And David, his conscience, sang a melody once more. Then the confrontation arose. The powers of evil, those ancient deceitful forces, beings who controlled death, rose up to oppose them. They had fed humanity with panic for generations, manipulated them with deception. And at that moment, they tried once more. They whispered, they writhed over the truth, they sought refuge behind shadows. But how can one rest in the shadows when truth itself is present? Emmerich's insight is extraordinary. Jesus did not disintegrate the demons with belligerence. He did not need to. His mere presence dissolved them like mist dissolving in the rays of the sun, like a falsehood evaporating when the truth is revealed. No weapon was drawn, no clamor was uttered, only an unwavering radiance. Those who remained asleep awoke, each one rising gradually, awakened as if from a deep swoon. Their visual organs widened, their beings revived. They instantly understood that it was him, the one they had been waiting for. Not because he appeared, but because his mere existence was the fulfillment of all hopes, every commitment, every lament. And then the miracle happened. Jesus, still radiating a celestial luminescence, guided them. A parade of spiritual beings. The compartment of souls was evacuated. Emmerich insists that it was not merely a representative second, it was a genuine exodus, a mystical retreat of the greatest group of faithful souls. Like a victorious general marching away from enemy territory with unshackled captives. And the openings of paradise, which until that moment had remained sealed since the primal transgression, were flung open. The messengers descended. They welcomed the redeemed, guiding them towards magnificence. It was not a demonstration that everyone could witness. It was not a performance for audiences. It was profound, eternal, and completely factual in the immaterial realm. This narrative of ascension is rarely depicted. Most films end at the crossroads or begin again in the empty tomb. However, it is there, in the intermediate space, that the tremendous return began. Mel Gibson has mentioned this secret in his interviews. He calls them the three most significant moments in human chronology, and he is correct. For in the period when the universe mourned the death of the Anointed One was liberating the fundamental pillars of creation. He was releasing captives, those who died in faith but had not yet enjoyed reality. It is a truth that resonates in the Apostles' confession. He descended into the realm of the dead. In the third period, he rose again. But the realm of souls is a misleading expression to modern ears. This was not the compartment of eternal damnation. It consists of the land of permanence. While Jesus led the redeemed to magnificence, the universe reoriented itself. Chronology had a new epicenter. From then on, the very passage of time was subdivided not only into before and after Christ, but also before and after the ascension. And here lies the most profoundly personal aspect. It wasn't limited solely to original souls. It related to you. For absolutely everything that Jesus accomplished in those imperceptible territories, he practiced as an example of what he would one day do in every essence. May he descend into your obscurity. May he call you by name. May he guide you away from terror, dishonor, insecurity, and death. Every human being carries fragments of themselves that we feel are buried, disregarded, rejected. But the narrative of the ascension is not merely a historical proclamation. It consists of a calling. I am contemplating you. I am heading towards you. And I understand the path. And this is only the beginning. As Sunday approached, the earth prepared for something no one imagined, especially the warriors on watch. It was Sunday morning, still dark, still calm. The tomb, carved in stone, remained under the silent watch of 16 imperial combatants. Their torches flickered in the air current. The ground remained still, but not for long. Among the warriors was a man named Clayton, a Thracian combatant mentioned in the experiences of St. Catherine Emmerich. He was not particularly devout, merely an individual fulfilling his duty, but that night he experienced something unusual. The atmosphere, he recounts, seemed dense, as if something invisible were pressing against his chest. It was a premonition that words could not express. And so, without warning, the rest was broken. From within the tomb emerged a radiance, not like the glow of fire or the flickering flame of a lamp, but an immaculate clarity. Inside the body of Jesus, bruised, covered in blood, inert, the recovery began. Emmerich's experience narrates this second with devotion. Christ's body rises above the stone without any effortful movement. The law of gravity meant absolutely nothing. The wounds in his abdomen and extremities did not bleed. On the contrary, they radiated, shining with clarity, not heaviness. The linen cloths collapsed, intact, as if never touched by manipulation. They were organized, arranged, calm, intentional, like a whisper coming from beyond the curtain saying, "I was here, and in this instant, I live." Outside, the hill experienced a tremor, but it was not a conventional earthquake tremor. It was as if creation itself recognized the return of the one who had originated it. The stone that sealed the tomb, weighing nearly 2 tons, moved, but not with brute force. Emmerich recounts that it was turned delicately, silently, as if the very passage of time stopped to witness the instant. Then the messengers arrived. 2 of them descended in dazzling whiteness, their movement agile, yet fluid. They did not invade the compartment. They opened it as one might open the entrance to an inviolable sanctuary. Clayton reached out to grasp his armor, but his limbs failed him. Around him, the remaining warriors fell, incapacitated, subjugated by a dominion they could neither recognize nor resist. Their projections burned on the surfaces, frozen by divine radiance. For an instant, the most guarded compartment on Earth transmuted into the weakest space beneath the vaults, and thus he emerged. Jesus rose without haste or pomp. His garment shone with radiance, not crafted by human hands. St. Catherine mentions that even the vegetation turned. The grass, the olive tree, even the flowers, especially those that bloom in the darkness, all reoriented themselves on their path, not by the sunlight, but because they recognized their originator. But Jesus did not linger at the tomb. In an instant, he appeared miles away in a small room on the other side of the metropolis, where Mary, his mother, was praying quietly. No opening was made, no footprints were heard. He simply materialized. He observed her and, with a gentle gesture, whispered only 3 words. "Mother," he finished. Mary, who had experienced the previous periods in silent grief, at that moment felt her essence rise. The blade of sorrow that Simeon had long ago predicted would pierce her heart was pushed away, not by force, but by serenity. Not long after, another woman approached the tomb, Mary Magdalene, isolated, desperate, and broken. She did not come expecting a miracle. She came searching for a corpse, but the corpse could not be found. She witnessed the displaced stone, the vanished guards, the empty tomb, and then 2 angels positioned where Jesus had rested. They inquired, "Woman, why do you weep?" And with a choked voice, she replied, "They carried away my owner, and I do not know where they have left him." Then she turned and saw an individual behind her. She did not recognize him. Through his tears, he appeared to be a farmer until he uttered only one word, "Mary." She knelt down to her knees, seeking to embrace his feet, but he gently interrupted her. "Do not embrace me," he said, "for I have not yet entered into the presence of the Protector, but tell my companions." And at that moment, the communication spread. Mary Magdalene ran breathless, laughing and weeping. Her expression pierced the morning tranquility. "He is alive. I have beheld him." Returning to the place of hiding, the apostles struggled to believe. Some remained perplexed, some doubted, but Peter moved, John moved. They ran through the passageways, past Solomon's basin, climbing the elevation to the garden. John, the younger, arrived first. He stopped, inspected the interior. The tomb remained immaculate. The linen cloths were curled. Peter entered and touched the linen. In that second, everything inwardly changed in John. He didn't have all the answers, but his feelings believed. Peter remained uncertain, between sadness and astonishment. But soon he too would witness what no one imagined. For that ascension was not limited to returning to earthly life. It was about absolutely transforming reality. If the resurrection ended in the tomb, that would be enough. But Jesus did not stop. In subsequent periods, it manifested itself repeatedly in unexpected places at surprising moments for ordinary individuals, carrying an extraordinary terror. The Gospels grant us fragments of these appearances. However, the experiences of St. Catherine Emmerich portray them with intense vividness, moments of closeness, recovery, and unrestrained celebration. Take, for example, the journey to Emmaus. Two disciples, Cleopas and Simon, were making their way laboriously along the road, their hearts broken, their aspirations shattered. They spoke in hushed tones, trying to understand what was happening. A stranger joined them. He listened. He asked questions. He unfolded the sacred texts for them both, and yet they did not recognize him. Only after sharing a meal did everything make sense. In that second, Christ was the visitor. The one they imagined had permanently disappeared was there, accompanying them. They did not wait until dawn. They ran back to Jerusalem in the darkness, bursting through the entrance of the room where the others were hiding. We glimpsed him. But before they could finish, he manifested himself in the very center of the room. No opening was made, no footprints approached. He simply existed. The apostles froze in astonishment. Jesus smiled, revealed his wounds, and said, "May harmony be with you all." And it was not merely a greeting, it was a divine warning, an armistice, a message that death had been conquered and transgression would no longer dominate. To prove that it was not an illusion, he requested sustenance and consumed it before them. An elementary operation, but one that established the miracle in materiality. However, not all the people were present. Thomas was not there. Upon returning and being informed, he refused to partake. "Unless I observe your bruises and manipulate them properly, I will not be able to trust," he said. 9 periods later, Christ returned. This opportunity was given to Thomas. He contemplated him in his organs and offered his arms. "Touch them, have faith." Thomas collapsed to his knees. "My Creator and my magnificence." Jesus showed a smile and communicated an affirmation that continues to resonate. Fortunate are those who did not observe but trusted. It was a transmission for subsequent ages, for each of us who would carry the radiance without witnessing the fire in first perspective, and that radiance spread swiftly. St. Catherine describes how during those periods Christ consulted not only the apostles, but also Mary, his mother, privately. In an instant, she remained in solitary prayer. Immediately, she experienced his existence, like the radiance of the sun completely bathing her. Both lacked countless expressions. Feelings spoke much more deeply than any vocabulary could ever convey. He also visited Lazarus, Martha, and Mary of Bethany, the siblings he greatly esteemed. Martha, perpetually the hostess, ran to offer him a vessel of water. Mary, who some time before had anointed his limbs with aromatic essence, reached out to touch his garment again. She needs no proof. She already trusted in the home, Emmerich recounts, filled with such immense serenity that even the birds began to chirp distinctly. And subsequently came the glorification. On a mountain peak in Galilee, multitudes gathered, men, women, children, all contemplating the restored sovereign. Jesus stood before them, clothed not in whiteness, but in absolute splendor. He uttered final words that would shape the times to come. "Every supremacy in the immaterial and material realms has been granted to me. Go, therefore, and transform every population into my followers. I will remain at your side until the end of time." As he spoke, a cloud enveloped him. He began his ascension, not with ostentation, but with absolute majesty. His limbs rose, his body ascended, and then he disappeared. 2 ethereal beings materialized and communicated. "Why do you remain gazing at the heights? This Christ will return in the form you saw him depart." The apostles returned to Jerusalem, not in adoration, but in celebration. They had witnessed him alive. They had touched supreme transcendence. But chronology had not ended. 10 periods had passed, and at the Feast of Pentecost everything was reshaped once more. The apostles, accompanied by Mary and numerous others, were in prayer in an elevated chamber when a whirlwind of activity broke the stillness. Not merely figurative fire, but concrete and tangible flames radiated from their heads. Yet, instead of igniting, they strengthened. Each individual began to speak in different vernaculars, languages they had never known. The metropolis outside overflowed with travelers from every territory. Suddenly, each one grasped the communication in their own language. It was the beginning of the body of worshippers. And Peter, who had previously been overcome by anxiety, now stood boldly in the pneuma. He spoke with fervor, proclaiming the resurrection not as a fable, but as a second that reshaped existence. 3,000 peoples had faith during that period. St. Catherine states that it was not merely a collective movement. It was a movement of the immaterial realm, a movement that reconfigured everything. Christ's vocabulary now carried power not only in the invisible realms, but also on the earth's surface in every segment of the earth. Even Peter's shadow began to heal the sick. In one instance, a person unable to walk rested waiting on the path, hoping Peter would pass by. When this happened, the person experienced something similar to a surge of vigor coursing through their body. For the first time in many rotations, they stood up. The paths of Jerusalem were transformed. They became conduits of healing, and even the bars of the penitentiaries could not contain the inflammation. In one scene, Emmerich describes how a being from the celestial realm burst through the gates of a prison, and the apostles emerged unharmed, unchained, and fearless. And the blaze was not contained in Jerusalem. It spread through Africa by means of the only Ethiopian baptized by Philip. It connected to Damascus, where Saul, once a belligerent persecutor, was blinded by a flash of celestial authority and awoke 3 periods later as Paul, a disseminator for every locality on the globe. One transformation provoked another, one miracle revived another miracle, and the planet ignited. Not a devastating blaze, but one that completely transforms. This constituted the realm of resurrection. Not merely did an individual return to existence, but existence itself had been eternally reshaped. Mel Gibson once said, "The resurrection is not just a second, it's the watershed moment of the universe in its entirety." And he is absolutely correct. If this narrative moved you, share something from within you. Leave a word of faith in the comments. Enjoy the material. Send it to someone who needs it right now. And if you're still eager to understand more, watch the material currently playing on your screen, where we reveal a segment of Christ's death that even cinema hasn't dared to portray. It's not over, and neither are you.